Make your next move with American Express Business Platinum. You'll get 5 times membership rewards points on flights and prepaid hotels booked on AmexTravel.com. Plus, enjoy access to the American Express Global Lounge Collection. And with the welcome offer of 120,000 points, your business can soar to all new heights. Terms apply. Learn more at americanexpress.com/business-platinum. Amex Business Platinum, built for business by American Express.
Home Abstract and Title Company was founded in 1867 and is the oldest company still operating in McClennan County. Home Abstract is comprised of a team of honest, friendly, hardworking professionals dedicated to providing both commercial and residential real estate clients with the highest level of communication and service. Their team is committed to working hard and building and maintaining strong relationships because transactions are so much more than just deals. They are clients, deserving of the courtesy, care, and respect that Home Abstract and Title Company is known for. Visit Home Abstract and Title Company at homeabstract.com.
Cross the Brazos and Waco, ride hard and I'll make it by dawn. Cross the Brazos and Waco, I'm safe when I reach San Antonio.
Well, welcome back to the Waco History Podcast. This is our Crossroads series. Our Crossroads series continuing, and we've had several episodes. Rick, right?
Absolutely.
Rick Tellis is back as co-host.
We're knocking them out.
And so, in fact, the Athens of Texas, or our academic Crossroads episode, was so robust, as they say in academia.
Yeah.
We had to make 2 episodes out of it. So this is episode 2.
Yeah, and I just want to say, Stephen, that episode 1, the parts in episode 1 where you just nailed it, and maybe some of your best commentary ever.
I think so. And just, listener, we're recording episode 2 before we record episode 1. That's why Rick's comment is hilarious, but puts pressure really on episode 1. So we are very happy to have 2 guests with us. So we've got a full room today, but we've got folks who've done a lot of research on a couple of landmark local educational institutions. Rick, you want to introduce our guests?
Well, I think they'll do the best introducing themselves, and I'd love to ask them a few questions about themselves to kind of tee them up too.
Well, let's do that. Let's get
Marlene,
to know our guest.
Tell us about yourself.
Well, I'm Marlene McMichael. I actually live in Georgetown now, but I worked for TSTC, which is Texas State Technical College, for decades. Let's say it that way. It started as a consultant, and then it worked into a full-time position, and I retired a little bit less than a year ago as Associate Vice Chancellor for Government Affairs. So that was my primary job at TSTC. I would do all the federal issues, go to Washington for that, but mostly worked at the state capitol, and that was my background. I knew many of the legislators there.
Well, most importantly, where did you grow up?
I grew up in South Texas, near Corpus Christi.
Gotcha.
Yeah. And my claim to fame is that I wrote the 50th anniversary coffee table book for TSTC, and so I am the keeper of all TSTC trivia.
Great.
That's what that means.
So if our listeners are really invigorated by this discussion, where would they go find that?
They would just contact the chancellor's office on the Waco campus, and I know that there are extra books there, so they can pick one up. It's wonderful history.
Awesome.
And I commend you for doing this type of a podcast, because some of the icons who were instrumental in starting TSTC are what I call Texas heroes. I mean, they really were. I mean, Jack Colgan is mammoth, and I know that everybody in Waco knows that name, but you may not know everything he did, and I was stunned. And so he's a great guy, and he was very instrumental. There were others, John Conley, and there's a whole Conley connection all the way through TSTC. So I love hearing these stories, particularly in that time frame, because this was the post-World War II era, and it was like the can-do America, and that generation did things that they never dreamed possible when they were kids, and yet they did them, and it to me is a very exciting time in our history.
Yeah, and people like Jack left an incredible shadow, cast a great shadow on our community. We actually, you wouldn't know this because we haven't released those other episodes yet, but he's proved big in a couple of our episodes so far. So.
Yeah, well, I could tell you a whole bunch of things he did, but maybe I better wait till the next podcast.
So Ashley, how about you? Give us your bio.
So I've been teaching history at MCC for 23 years now, and a Baylor guy as well. So very comfortable with Waco. Not from here originally. Born in Houston, and I was raised in Southern California. But I got back as soon as I could.
He's got a Texan, though. He's got the birth certificate. That's all
right.
that matters.
That's right.
Ashley and I matriculated together.
That's true.
Yeah.
So I, too, have a lot of faith in Stephen. I'm sure that first episode was fantastic.
What's your claim to fame, Ashley?
I really don't have one. My getting by has become my stock in trade. But I did not write the book on MCC, so I would like to. We do have a 50-year anniversary edition that our friend Kim Patterson wrote, and Sandra Sanchez did a 40-year, and there's a Baylor master's thesis by Michael Grant, one of the original 22 faculty. Mike White did a lot of research, so I'm building on all of those great scholars.
Ashley is also he's prolific in the blogosphere. You want to mention your blog, Ashley?
So I've got a Substack these days. I think it's imaginatively titled Ashley's Substack. Yeah. So.
All right, so check it out. So check it out. It's required reading. So I think we said we would start. I think with Marlene, if you want to start giving us a little bit of background on. It's an institution that's had many names, and keeping them straight and when it changes is as big a task as anything in writing a book on it. But if you could kind of lay out the story for us on what we now know as TSTC, and then we'll go back and let Ashley kind of talk about how that landscape emerges for MCC.
All right. As you know, after World War II, many of the military bases across the state, got deactivated. How do you say that?
Yeah, deactivated.
Deactivated notices. They actually gave you a notice, and that happened in 1964. And there was, much concern in Waco as to whether or not Waco would even survive because the annual salary was like $19 million.
Wow.
That's I don't know whether you realize it, but there's 2,100 acres for that military base that is now TSTC. That's a huge landmass. It makes TSTC one of the largest actual land campuses in the U.S., actually. And there were over 4,000 military personnel there and another 800 or so civilian personnel. So there was real concern about, what are we going to do?
And the reality is that was the one time in history, in Waco's history, if you look at the population curve, it actually flattened out.
Yeah,
was with the closure of those bases, maybe even slightly negative. So your point's well taken.
Mm-hmm.
Well, obviously, Waco's been blessed with some great community leaders, and there was a team. It was Harry Province and Harlan Fentress and then Jack Colgin, who kind of became a team, and both Province and Colgin were very well connected politically. And so they had schematics and drawings and, the floor plans of the whole base, and they took them and dropped them off at the governor's office. They went to Washington. They did everything they could think of to find a new purpose. And what they were thinking of was a National Guard pilot training type of facility.
Right.
And so they went and they talked to Governor Conley about that. That was Governor John Conley at that time. And Conley wasn't convinced. He felt like, and particularly in higher ed, we weren't thinking big enough. We weren't thinking outside the box. And what was happening is that the military was doing a lot of the technical mechanic type training for the U.S., and they were downsizing. So Conley was very concerned that industrial leaders needed workforce. And so I think they visited with him before the session in 65 in December. he went and he called in February of, so they visited with him in December 64, and he visited with Dr. Earl Rudder and Senator Bill Moore. They called him the Bull of the Brazos. He was a very powerful senator, and but he had Texas A&M in his district, and he talked to them about A&M taking over the military base, and in order to create a technical education center. And the brilliance of that is nobody else probably could have done it in the state. I mean, it had to be that senator and it had to be that college to make this work. And the very next day, he called this threesome from Waco back in and said this is what he wanted to do. And so that started the ball rolling. And in first part of April of that year, the session had just started in January, just like always. He issued an emergency proclamation that this needed to be done. And so in less than 3 weeks' time, the bill was filed, passed by the House, passed by the Senate, and signed by the governor.
Oh, my goodness.
And so the property became Texas A&M. Well, actually, that's not quite true. They took over the property, so to speak. And what was interesting is that then they called in Dr. Roy Duggar, and he was a high-level executive in Washington, D.C. He was very well connected with LBJ. In fact, he was one of the 10 people LBJ called to the White House after he returned from Dallas in the assassination of John Kennedy. So he's a good advisor. He was like a GS-16 in the pay grade. And so they called him, and he was also an A&M graduate. Dr. Rudder would consider nobody to head up the institution in Waco except an A&M graduate. So Rudder brings 3 names, and they sit down with Connolly, and they talk, and then Rudder and Duggar, the Rudder-Duggar, I keep calling it that connection, they got on a plane and went to Houston to meet with some leaders there, and they said, we don't want these 3 names. We want you, Dr. Duggar, to be the executive director of this new campus. And so they had to negotiate the salary, and he actually ended up getting paid more than the president of Texas A&M.
Oh, wow.
Because he was a high-level
working
executive
harder.
in Washington. Yeah. And so anyway, that's sort of how it all started. The interesting thing, though, is that they were both smart enough to know that because in a military institution, when it closes, it's basically stripped of everything, and it's either deeded over to a city or community or different things. In Harlingen, it was actually split in half and deeded part to the city and part to somewhere else. But in Sweetwater, it actually belonged to the city, and the military leased it from the city. But here, they knew that if they waited for the military to give it to Waco or to the college, it would take 20 years. Well, the state wouldn't invest in it, and neither would the federal government. So it wasn't going to work. So they really worked out a plan to buy this $57 million facility, and they bought it for a little over $5 million. But the legislature had to appropriate that money. But that was the real brilliance of how that all transpired. And I don't want to take everybody else's time, so
no, it's great.
Well, the funniest part, some of the funniest stories in this was that the military was used to stripping the bases. So you'd have semis come in, every week, and they'd be empty, and they'd go set up shop somewhere, and they'd just start putting stuff in their semi to take back to Fort Hood or to wherever. And Dr. Duggar would go out there, and he goes, "Y'all go to the snack bar and have a soda on me." And then he'd go call their general or their commander, and they'd have to come back, reassemble everything, and put it all back. And one time, he was negotiating with a civilian representative of a general from somewhere, and the negotiations had gone on for 3 hours. And he was really frustrated with that, and because he would tell everybody, "I want every widget, every chair, every wrench, every hammer. Only thing I don't want is the smell of the jet engine." And so he wanted everything on that base, and that was the deal that he'd made with the military originally, and with the president. And so anyway, after 3 hours of negotiating, he looked at his watch and he knew where LBJ would be in the White House. So he called him. He says, "Here, talk to your boss." And he gave the phone to this civilian negotiator, and that was the end of the whose base is it really?
Oh, wow.
That's a good strategy. I need to use that sometime.
Yeah, it was. I can just and I think I read this in the oral histories from Baylor, and he said you could hear LBJ on the other end. I mean, you could hear him yelling basically at this negotiator. But that was the end of the whose property is it? So,
and wasn't it James Connolly Technical Institute, right? Wasn't that the name of it initially? Yeah.
Initially under A&M, it was the James Connolly Technical Institute of Texas A&M.
Okay.
And we'll get to that maybe, but later, when it was separated from A&M, it became the TSTI, or the Texas State Technical Institute.
Mm-hmm. What did that kind of affiliation with A&M initially do for how did it kind of shape that early history, the fact that they had a connection to such an established system?
Well, it was brilliant. I mean, it really was, in that there was some authorization for bonds and some other things. But it also, the legislature only appropriated $200,000 to James Connolly Tech. They called it Connolly Tech. Mm-hmm. And so that wasn't even enough to open the gates. It cost $1 million, just the electric bill a year. So $200,000 wasn't going to go very far. And so they really had to start their programs based on federal grants and some different things like that. But that A&M name helped in that. Mm-hmm. And so it was part of that. It smoothed a lot of ruffled feathers because people didn't understand what a vocational technical school was. In fact, there is a quote in the book, and it was in the oral histories from Baylor, that they interviewed Duggar's assistant, and she said they thought we were sort of like a Job Corps, and it was for students who couldn't do well in a college environment, and that really wasn't the case because our statute says. When I say our, I mean TSTC's statute says that we are to focus on highly technical programs not typically offered in community colleges.
I see.
And so, really that is the mission of TSTC. It's supposed to be the high-end technical, and it always was. Mm-hmm. And so, at any rate, one of the first conversations that Duggar had with, they called them the Board of Directors then, not the Board of Regents, but with the Board of Directors at A&M was they were real concerned about whether or not we were going to allow female students. Mm-hmm. And he said yes. So not too long.
Because at the time,
they weren't.
People may not realize that, but A&M was a male-only institution,
Absolutely,
right?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So that was a big sticky point, but he won that debate. And what happened was the Texas House Education Committee really felt like when they set up Connolly Tech, it was governed by the precursor to Texas Education Agency and the precursor to the Higher Ed Coordinating Board,
right,
and the Board of Directors of Texas A&M. So the problem was nobody really knew who the boss was and really understood what they were trying to do. Duggar did. His whole career was in technical education, and he actually was the director in the Washington Department of Education for manpower training, and so, but it was confusing, and so. The House Committee, Interim Committee on Education, actually in, I think it was 1967, recommended that they sever. Mm-hmm. And so that next legislature they did. Mm-hmm. And but that was the reason.
Okay.
So
Okay.
In that early history, there's a young local rep here, Murray
Watson.
Murray
Yeah.
Watson.
Mhm.
Yeah. What was his involvement? I mean, I guess just getting these
Well, he
bills
was
through the House.
He was a senator.
Okay.
And no, he was incredible.
Yeah.
And he, when they severed TSTC from A&M, and like I said, the Bull of the Brazos passed the first bill that created us and put us with A&M. Nobody argued with him.
Right.
Well, when they severed us and tried to create something new that had never happened before and made TSTC an independent institution under its own Board of Regents, there was tremendous controversy.
Mm-hmm.
That session, there were 3 Senate filibusters to oppose it. The name changed like 3 times in the piece of legislation.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I mean, they wanted to call it the Manpower Resources System, and that was scratched out. And then it was the State Technical Institute of Texas. And then that was scratched out, and it was in fact, I have the piece of legislation right here. You can see all the scratches. so
as they went through
and
all the
eventually,
iterations.
when
Yeah.
that piece of legislation passed, which was Senate Bill or House Bill 137, it was TSTI, Texas State Technical Institute, but Murray was able to get it through all 3 of those filibusters and into law.
Great.
Yeah.
Yeah, naming things in my professional career, it's always the most difficult thing. A new product, a new business, naming
Child.
stuff. Yeah, those were pretty easy. But yeah, so I could see where they would struggle getting the right name on the institution.
Mm-hmm.
And then, what was some of the early programming? What did they focus on?
They did some of the same ones we do today, which is welding, building construction, but they also did meteorology and some others. But it was more focused on the mechanics of industry, not so much things like computers mechanics now, but not culinary and not things that would be what I would say softer skills.
Right.
Well, that's great, Marlene. We'll come back because we obviously the institution evolves, as the book goes on. But I want to get the Genesis narrative for MCC. Ashley, it's interesting that I don't think I had connected the dots. We're really talking about the same period with both institutions. And so talk a little bit about MCC.
Same period and also some of the same heroes. There's a monument to Senator Murray Watson on our campus. He was also super important in getting, I think he sponsored the legislation that created MCC, gave it the green light. As Marlene says, it really is an American story, and it takes place in the context of post-World War II American history. And it's part of the economic growth miracle. I think it's part of the space race and the Sputnik scare and the baby boom. It takes place right in the middle of sort of America's civil rights movement. It wouldn't be possible without the Great Society. There's a couple of pieces of legislation that make this the opportune moment in 1963 and 1965, talking about higher education facilities. And so much is going on, and it is the perfect moment, and it shouldn't be surprising, I suppose, that TSTC and MCC come from that same period. We mentioned Harry Provance. He was instrumental in all of this. You see all kinds of support coming from the Trib for MCC, and it's almost like an inside conspiracy in some ways. Paul Marable is the other big name.
Yeah.
Chamber of Commerce, and they created a steering committee, I think in 63 or 64, and started out, somehow the chamber appropriated $1,000, and they went out there and they created this upsurge of public opinion for a community college. We would have probably called them junior colleges back then. MCC claims to be the first junior college in Texas to incorporate as a community college, and I don't know that not to be true.
And what was the reason? What is the difference between a junior college and community college, or is there a difference? Is
So-
it just a name evolution?
I think it is name evolution. I think
Okay.
there's a lot of good reasons to call a community college instead of a junior college. Although now a lot of people are trying to get away from community college, but brand wise.
Right.
But I think I think we do incorporate it as McClennan Community College. Although in a lot of the state paperwork they didn't recognize that, you'll still see McClennan Junior College in some things. So they get these Waco community leaders together, and they start putting together this plan. And again, there's some lobbying to do with the state. You've got to get approval from the Texas Board of Education, so it's got to be a lot of coordination with Austin. One of the interesting things is there was a worry that Baylor would not be happy with a junior college in town. And another hero in this...
Stephen, can you defend that?
No, I cannot defend it.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right.
Well, it gets better because Abner McCall was a big champion of it, and he would lots of supporting stories in the Trib, and many positive quotes from Abner McCall. There's a big meeting that happens at Kaiser Auditorium, and that was the symbolism of saying, "Hey, we're all in this together."
So this is the president of Baylor coming out
Abner
on
McCall.
Baylor's campus, pro MCC. Yeah.
Right, publicly coming out. Our friend John Ballou, who keeps celebrating 100+ birthdays.
Yes. Yeah.
Is still sharp, remembers it all, and evidently within John Ballou was provost. Eventually, I think he was not provost during this time, but Abner McCall privately and publicly was very supportive of MCC. There's a place for this. Only helps Baylor, only helps the community. So
Yeah. Let me just say, from a current time and space in Waco, I still see a lot of that collaboration going on between these institutions we're talking about. It's really quite amazing to see the camaraderie, and it's more than that. I mean, they genuinely go out of their way to help each other. So,
Yeah, I mean, I think they've doubled down on that in recent years. I think it's been a good relationship.
And President Duggar from TSTC was also vocally, very vocal in support. I think at the time, Waco was the largest town in Texas not to have a community college. There was a community college in Hill. There was a community college in Temple. There was a community college in Navarro Community College. All of those presidents, obviously, they were getting Waco people come to those colleges. They all supported the college. So everybody came together. That's a fun story of everyone come together for the college. So, yeah, lots of politics, lots of there are votes involved. There was 3,000 signatures on a petition to get the board to look at it. MCC got 7,000. The first vote, they had a series of votes. Did we want a community college? And even more important, would we want to pay taxes for a community college? And that first tax vote was evidently very, very close. A little over 10,000 people voted, and it was about 100 vote margin. And so we've won a few close elections in our day, but and some of them get more comfortable. But
Yeah, I interviewed Cullen Smith. I did an interview with Cullen Smith, who's a local attorney. And I mean, one early question with MCC is, where are you going to put it? And he talked about that process, but talk a little bit about the setting is set for TSTC, but not so much for MCC.
So this is great because, of course, if you hang around Waco, when I got here in 1983 for the first time, people were talking about it. The problem with Waco is we had this tornado, and even in the 90s, what explains Waco? The tornado. So we're always looking for ways to revitalize Waco. And as we said, there were some bad things happening in Waco. A lot of people moving out of downtown, and there was a lot of worry about Waco during this period. So the business community was anxious to see a place like TSTC. The statistics that said a community college would be good for the city, people were interested in that. So there was a thought, if we're going to revitalize downtown, let's put MCC downtown. That evidently there was a big building right across the courthouse that was under consideration. Maybe the Montgomery Ward had just gone out of business. There was talk about that. And then, of course, the whole idea of moving out there onto the escarpment on the old Cameron property, which wasn't owned by the Camerons anymore, 200 acres. Getting ahead of the story, but $290,000 for that property.
Mm-hmm. That was a good deal.
I would do it. I would do that right now.
Yeah, that
I'll
would
go
be
and get my checkbook.
If I could just imagine a nice development out there, residential. I doubt we could get a place for $290 anymore if that's the way it had gone. So there was a lot of, and in fact, a lot of antipathy. Why are we doing this if we're not going to put it downtown? Now, the reason that Conley made so much sense so TSTC is just ahead of all of this kind of tramping down the trail for MCC, and so if the TSTC or TST's tramping down the trail for MCC, and so if TSTC has this deal with Conley, it's obviously this huge Air Force base, and they'd have plenty of room for our 22 faculty members. And so we go out there, I think September of 1966, I think is our first fall. And we're there until January of 69, I believe.
Okay. So
That's about right.
Yeah.
And at first they were leasing from the Air Force, and then it flipped, and the Air Force and MCC were leasing from TSTC.
Yes.
Or TSTI then.
At that point.
So, Marlene, do you agree with everything Ashley just said, or would you like to offer a rebuttal? Or
No, I agree. And there still is a lot of collaboration today, because it's really important in higher ed that you don't step on each other's toes, and that you don't, in other words, for example, there is an agreement that TSTC does not teach medical type of programs or in Waco, because MCC does a great job.
Yeah,
We do the same. We had the same agreement with Temple College at our Hunto campus. Now, there is no community college in Harlingen, so that's a big medical EMT, operating room technician, all of that stuff. They do a lot of that training there. Dental hygiene is even in Harlingen, even in West Texas, because those programs aren't offered in that area. So we don't duplicate programs.
Well, and that's an interesting aspect we haven't talked about, is the statewide reach of TSTC, and Waco plays a particular part in that in the overall state
Actually,
construct.
that's a very good point, because that was John Connolly's logic. He wanted industry to have an educational institution that would teach what they needed, but he wanted it central, and that's what Waco was.
You meant kind of a crossroads of sorts of the state.
Exactly.
yeah, you came up with that idea.
Hey, that's really good.
So Ash, these 22 faculty, I mean, what areas are they? I mean, how do they begin to build an academic program? What do they decide to focus on? Yeah.
So they hire a president first. So
Yeah.
let me back up one
Sure.
second if I can. So there's Provence and there's Maribel, and they're trying to put this together. And evidently, so they're having these town meetings, and more and more interest is coming. And they have a meeting to elect a chair of the steering committee. And evidently, Provence has somebody in mind, and someone is so vocal that he gets nominated president of the steering committee. And before anybody knows what's going on, this fellow Henry Griffin is the chair of the steering committee, and he'll be the first president of the MCC board. So they have the election, they put together a board, and it's not too long, and they start hiring administrators, and so hire.
And now, important fact: so the MCC board is elected locally.
That's right.
TSTC's board is nominated by the governor. Is that correct?
Exactly.
Okay.
Very, very different.
Yeah. Different construct, different governance structure. Okay. Sorry,
So
Ashley.
I think 47 different community colleges, and we're all locally governed. Yeah. Although there's certainly cooperation, it's sort of a federation of community colleges. So we hire, or we've got a board now, and they hired Wilbur Ball, who was a vice president at Wharton College, and he comes aboard and starts building a administration and also hiring folks. So first 22 faculty across the board. There's, when I came to MCC in 2000, you could still see some of these original guys, and I think they're all gone now, but Interesting group all over the board. Famous chemistry teacher. We taught government and history, and then you get a whole bunch of people, sort of D-Day +2, +3. I mean, we get a bunch of people come in '69 when the campus gets over to our current location up there on the hill, and spreading out from there. But we've got Marlene Kelly, who's another local person, always fun. Started out one of the original 22, and she was actually 22 years old. She said that many people in her class were older than she was. But Mike White, again, who wrote a lot of these early histories, was there teaching history. Fun. By the time when we build a building for a long time on the main campus, we can house the whole faculty in one office building, the faculty office building, still known as the faculty office building, although we've got faculty all over campus.
Was there an original building on that campus that you guys reused, or were you starting from scratch?
So we did start from scratch. I mean, it's wilderness out there.
Yeah,
there was a house.
There's the Cameron home, right, which we are rebuilding, replicating. The Cameron house survives, which is great. But yeah, so we build this these rolling hills, and we build these buildings, and I can't remember. There's 7 or 8 original buildings. They look very 1960s, and we've been trying to change that over the years.
It's got to be one of the most beautiful,
Yeah, listener, if you have not been to MCC's campus, go see where the Highlanders hang out. I mean, it's a beautiful campus. It really is.
Speaking of Highlanders, where did that mascot come from?
So that comes early on, and that's so when they decided it was going to be McClennan Community College, there was the Scottish flair.
McClennan.
To all that.
Say it.
That's
McClennan.
Right.
There you go.
Very
there
nice.
You go. All right.
I'm sorry if you're of Scottish descent. You're listening.
Beautiful campus. There was a decision. Someone suggested just one big building and have everything in there, and so someone wisely decided to put buildings all over that area, and so it's a beautiful place to walk from building to building. We have lots of folks come out there who use that as their walking route. It really is. Before I knew as a Baylor kid, before I knew anything about MCC, I'd heard about 10 people say, "Oh, what a beautiful campus!" And so it's beautiful out there.
So Marlene, mascots. TSTC, has it ever had a mascot?
Yes, but I don't remember what it is. I would say mascots and sports are not a high priority. I think Harlingen campus has a mascot, and I think Waco does as well. And it's probably buried in that book, but I didn't pull that out. So, but normally there's not a lot of there's certainly no competitive sports unless it's just a bunch of kids getting out there and.
Yes,
mixing it up.
Although they do compete in a bunch of industrial competitions.
Yes,
I mean, there's a whole.
Thank you for that lead in.
Yeah.
TSTC's students have won more Skills USA awards than all Texas colleges combined, and so that's like our Olympics. That's our football.
So for a listener, explain Skills USA just a little bit. What would they do in one of these competitions?
They compete first statewide. For example, you compete in just about any type of industry.
Automotive repair.
Welding is a big one.
Yeah.
In fact, the picture of the girl on the cover of our 50th anniversary book was the national winner of the welding competition.
Nice.
And female. So, but yes, they compete statewide, and then the state winners get to go to a national competition. And this is huge. There are thousands of students there. And the campuses have always been very supportive. They're very proud of these kids. Some of their banners and awards hang in one of our buildings, and that's our trophy room, so to speak. But yes, that's a big deal.
Well, back to sports. I'm sorry we don't have time for me to list all of our junior college national championships.
No, we've got time. Go ahead.
Go ahead.
All
Actually,
right.
go.
Yeah.
Don't miss one.
Just go fast.
So we have won national championships in tennis, which we don't have a tennis team anymore. Baseball a couple of times. Golf many times. Our dance team is maybe like 8 times in a row or something. So we have had a great run of sports. Great basketball teams. Great basketball team this year if you're following along. So, and I think it's amazing to me that MCC caught on so fast. So we're talking about late 1960s.
Yeah.
And within a decade, MCC is a local institution. And maybe some of that, we have some early success in baseball. There was the old Major League player, Craig McMurtry, I think. And so you'd hear, of course, there was Vinnie Johnson. And so I do think, as sports crazy as Central Texans are, we're a commuter campus, so we never built a 50,000 person stadium, but there was that sports hook for the Highlanders were out there doing some good.
Yeah, so I wanted to ask that. I mean, as far as getting established, because I think for both of you, you're heading into the 70s. So you talk about the 60s being good for legislation being passed, but the economy is about to crater a bit in the 70s, and so. Talk a little bit more, Ashley, about why you think MCC is able to establish itself so quickly.
So it's great timing all along. Perfect time to be chartered. And then even as bad as the 70s are, I don't think this is true anymore. But when you talk to some of our I was about to say old timers, but that's not the way to say it. But when you talk to some of those original folks, they would tell you. Bad economic times, conversely, are sometimes good for community college, and that may have been true. But that is, I talked about coming along in the middle of the civil rights moment, and MCC had a great blessing, right? They started in 1965 without any history, and they could they could decide to be open enrollment, and we're for everybody in the community. And you saw that diversity from the very beginning, from administration, faculty, student body. So that was a great blessing. So we really were the place for the community and remain that way. And so that may have been part of it. Here's a place that you can really celebrate, again, with the benefit of having almost no history, and that we have to apologize for.
That's really interesting, because I think for both these institutions,
I would agree.
Yeah, Baylor's struggling across town a little bit with the weight of its history, I would say, then and now, and how do we reckon with that part of our past? But to be a new institution,
and great people. 1972, we're and again, just one story among a million stories. So many heroes, as Marlene says. But Al Pollard came from Mississippi via Tennessee. I mean, 10 years earlier, the guy had been walking with Martin Luther King. And Diane Nash and the Nashville sit-ins, and now he's an administrator at MCC, coming with with a technical school background, but just sort of there to firm our spine and in some ways, be an exemplar of moral courage. And he was with us, he's still got a name on a door in there, but he was there every day for 45 years, and it was just a lot of. You can't succeed without some luck, and we just got lucky on a lot of things, timing, personnel. Really, some great people came through those doors.
Yeah, Marlene, you're over here nodding. Just the democratization of kind of education, or education for all. Just, as Ashley was talking about that, how does that play out at TST?
Well, certainly, I think it's huge. Most of our students, even today, are first-generation college students. Their families, and graduation is so much fun because everybody comes.
Yeah.
Because it is a real celebration. This is the first kid in the family that's got a degree. So it is, and the fact that. Under A&M, we were a female institution as well. So I think those things played a big role. Plus, we're technical. So, the people that we attract are people that are used to getting their hands dirty. And so I think that's, our chancellor loves to take people into one of the machining rooms, and on the blackboard, although it's a whiteboard, there's all this geometry and all kinds of math that I can't even tell you what it is or what subject matter in math it is, algebra or whatever. He says, look at that and tell me that's not college. Because I love the fact that I was at a conference recently, and the speaker liked to say that she likes to find the sparkle in everybody. Everybody has sparkle, and that's true. You know, some of us are work with our hands, and our sparkle really is in what we can craft. And
so we're at this really interesting time in our economic history, certainly in Waco and really across the country. People with trade skills are in high demand. And as a former business owner who hired a ton of people from TSTC, and so I know I'm very familiar with those salaries, and also as a school board member, and I know what those salaries are. All of our plumbers made more than probably any teacher in Waco. Mm-hmm. And
I'm sure.
And it's not to denigrate one or the other, but it's to say that the need in our society right now for people who know how to do things is in high demand. And so I know I don't have the current stats at TSTC, but I mean the starting salaries of their graduates are really good.
And I love that part about the way that we market our programs is that you can go online and see the program. You'll see what courses you'll take. You'll know exactly how much it's going to cost you. You'll know what jobs are available to you when you finish that program, and you'll know what those salaries are, all online. Mm-hmm. And we have, I don't know if it's 5 or 6 today. It started, I think, with 5 programs, and it may be up to 7. But some of our top programs, if you don't have a job in 6 months, we'll give you your tuition back. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, we guarantee jobs. And in fact, the programs are evaluated on an annual basis so that if they either don't have enough, don't attract students, don't attract jobs, or they're low pay, they're culled. And something, for example, the last session I worked for TSTC at the Capitol, there was a lot of angst because we had the only associate degree in agriculture in our Harlingen campus. Very well-known, popular professor, and they decided after studying it that they made $10 an hour once they graduated, and that it really wasn't hitting the Harlingen market as far as what they needed. So they called the program, and all the Valley legislators were upset. And so we'd go in and explain, well, we're replacing it and using that land to put in an alignment program. They make $80,000 a year starting salary. And they went, oh.
Yeah, and then they understood.
Power line technicians, just
right.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, those.
Electrical
program.
power linemen. Yeah. Yes, that's what that is.
Well, and I love the way that these institutions have evolved. Part of MCC's story is now they're able to provide affordable 4-year degrees now. You want to talk about that a little bit, Ashley?
Sure. Our university center, our university partners, Texas Tech and Tarleton and other folks, just the idea of having a great education at a more reasonable way. I mean, we don't have a 4-year state college here, but now we do. Mm-hmm. And so that has been very helpful, and that's been going on for about 20 years now, and gets bigger all the time, and that's a great bonus. We still feed a lot of folks into Baylor and Texas A&M and University of Texas and institutions all over the world. It is also, the whole community college, it's a liminal space, I think, for a lot of folks. I have my two Waco cousins are both very successful. One graduated from TSTC, and the other one graduated from mortuary school, and they've done really great. They've been incredible for the community. But they were both at MCC a couple of semesters, and got a lot out of that. And so, again, it when I think about how all of these places work together,
right,
in our community.
I mean, there's some life-changing, trajectory-changing stories. We talked about that a little bit with TSTC. I mean, I know personally of high school kids, local kids graduate, go to MCC, do the 2-year engineering program, finish up at A&M. I mean, and these are first-generation Americans, and their life trajectory is different because we had these programs in Waco, and they could step through them.
Marlene mentioned medical. We've had the nursing program since 1967. It's hard to walk into a Waco hospital and not not find yourself surrounded by MCC nurses, which is, and all kinds of medical tech. So.
One thing I'd want to ask both of you to revisit in your research that I'm sure you ran into, because sometimes I remind my Chamber of Commerce friend Rick, we got to talk about the hard stuff too. So I'm interested in you kind of talking about maybe challenges that each institution went through. We've talked about success and getting established and support, great support and those sort of things, but perhaps maybe tension points or points where the institution ran into obstacles and maybe had to remake itself a little bit or evolve a bit. Even as I suggest that, you're both nodding. So I'm interested to know kind of maybe for each of you some things that come to mind there.
Well, I think I alluded to it a little bit earlier when there was so much confusion about who we were and what we taught, and we were actually governed by two state agencies and a board of regents that was not our college, it was A&M. That was difficult, so it's, and the both Conley and Dr. Rutter were brilliant in putting Roy Duggar in as the first president. And the reason is because he understood the vision. He knew what it could be. And so he worked to get that done. And so eventually when we were a standalone institution, they were able to, create their own brand and create their own image. And so that was helpful. We have communities coming all the time wanting us to put a TSTC there. And what people need to understand is that the way this Texas law is written, and because of the networks and the territory that are occupied by community colleges, we can't go into a community college district without permission. So we have to be invited. And to create a campus is really, it takes state legislation. So a community has to decide, much like they did with MCC, that we want this. Then they have to raise enough startup capital to at least put us in a building, because you can't build a building with legislative funds overnight. That's that's a 2.5 to 3 year process. So they've got to raise some capital. They have to get the bill passed. We can say, yeah, we support that and we can handle that, but they have to make the initiative. So that's a hard hurdle, a big hurdle to overcome. But we have been able to add campuses, so we have actually 10 locations right now across Texas. And some of our newest campuses will outpace Waco. We fully believe that the Fort Bend County campus will be larger than Waco in the coming years.
Well, Stephen, despite you and your negative comments about Chamber of Commerce, I will say in real time.
Hey, don't take that from what I say. They were negative comments about you.
Oh, yeah. Okay, well, that's fine.
We take back what we said about episode 1.
It really wasn't that good, to be honest with you. There's a real-time story going on right now in Waco between TSTC, the city, the county, Chamber of Commerce, and a few other partners to put a satellite teaching facility in the industrial district. So TSTC was born where it was born because there was a free facility.
Yeah.
But if you look at how Waco's grown out, that's not necessarily the industrial epicenter of Waco. It's really that kind of area bound by Highway 6, 84, and I-35.
Which has capacity.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so, so this group has got together, and currently it's been funded. It's in the design process, so they'll put a satellite industrial training center. We're still trying to figure out the name for it. So, like I said, names are always hard. And, that's going to be a great game changer, I think, for the Waco and community.
Oh, that's cool.
And I think one of the assets, again, is people, in that our previous chancellor, Bill Segura, who had the vision for the return value funding formula, and Chancellor Reeser, are both very nimble, and they believe that TSTC, to be successful, has to be nimble in order to respond to industry. And so they go out of their way to make that happen.
So, Ashley, when you were nodding earlier when I was talking about challenges, maybe.
Well, nimble's a good word. Half of what we do is workforce. And so, again, as Marlene says, that changes all the time and doesn't help to provide the person we needed 10 years ago. I mean,
Yeah, VCR techs aren't
Right.
getting the jobs anymore.
so
Yeah.
that
My favorite program that we got rid of was the pinball machine mechanic.
Oh, my gosh.
Shame, man.
I wish that was on my resume. That would be awesome.
So from the very beginning, I suppose growing pains were our biggest problem. There was always a space issue. I mean, I think we started with less than 1,000 students, I mean, much less. And then within 10 years, we were at 4,000 and then 6,000
That's
and
amazing.
8,000. And so we had space issues. And then, of course, because we needed to build, that meant we were going to have bond issues. And again, keep going to the folks at in McClennan County to support us, which they basically have in just an amazing way. We did lose one bond election once, but we won the rematch. But building all those buildings, and so we finally got to we got to a place where we could accommodate the need. I suppose going forward, this is we built all that right on the verge of more people doing distance education and online, and so who knows? I think Baylor just did a rebuild that anticipates fewer people being in the classroom. So who knows what this will look like 20 years from now? But I think as education changes, and I think we're actually at a crossroads in terms of education nationally.
Good placement of the word.
Community college enrollment has been going down in the 21st century. Peaked a little nationally. Community college enrollment peaked a little bit right after the turn of the century. So again, it's just trying to stay ahead of what the need is going to be. COVID was not easy, has not been easy on us. That was a huge challenge. I mean, again, talk about all of those beautiful buildings and all of those parking garages that we built, and we didn't, it was pretty deserted there for a while.
Yeah.
Well, in the economy right now, there's an abundance of jobs. There's more jobs than there are people. So that probably hurts because employers are so desperate. They'll take people with lesser credentials just to get them in the door, and they'll train on themselves, whatever. So it probably is a tough time institutionally for both of you guys. It's ironic. The downturns is when there's a greater abundance of people who will jump into those programs.
Marlene, is your last chapter touch on the COVID era for?
No, it was written before COVID era, but TSTC was actually the first college in Texas to go back to campus. And what we did was we did all the instruction online, but you can't teach welding online. So we spaced out the labs, and so that was the interesting thing. We had to hire actually new instructors because you couldn't put but half the people in a lab at a given time, so you had to have more more labs or time slots, and so that meant additional instructors. And so, but that's the way they handled it, was in order to keep the kids moving and getting through with their programs, they went to hybrid type of classwork. But we didn't, we managed the COVID thing. I mean, they had a whole task force that was just doing COVID and skip tracing, and not skip tracing. What's the right word?
Contact
tracing.
Skip tracing, and that's a different podcast
thing altogether.
That's a different
but
podcast.
Yes, contact tracing, and then the protocols and all of those sorts of things that went on to keep people from getting sick. And I mean, obviously some did, but we real proud of how that was handled.
Interesting that hybrid model, and it's been carried on by some of the departments, including the HVAC department, allows the students, we had students working 20, 30 hours a week for us, doing their hybrid classes and doing their labs at night. It's like that's actually a great model because they were doing the online instruction, getting the lab work, and then they were coming to work and using their skills every day and making money. So, when you look at the financial map here for that student, I mean, they're earning money, whatever the cost of TSTC is, which is very affordable. Their cumulative earnings are great. They're not, whereas in traditional university, you're, usually not working at all 4 or 6 years in my case, and
It's called a victory lap.
it's a deficit. Yeah, you're running a deficit, and then you got to dig your way out of it the rest of your life. So,
Mhm. Yeah. Well, as y'all did research and looked at, I know you have some favorite stories that kind of you think of when you think of each of your institutions, that maybe some colorful stories from the history that kind of stand out to you. And I want to make sure we give you the opportunity to share those if you have them. They can be embarrassing if you want, but I mean, this is going to be publicly aired, so you can use your filter how you would like. But I think both institutions have their own character. They have their own folklore and color in their history, and so I'm just interested in maybe some stories that stand out to both of you from MCC and TSTC.
Well, again, so we're up to over 200 full-time faculty and several hundred adjunct faculty and teaching 8,000 students. So many people, so many stories. One of the things that we're proud of in terms of reaching out, a lot of people involved in this, but we've got a good our distinguished lecture series. We've brought a lot of folks to this community, including Supreme Court justices and United States senators and really important folks, and that's something we've always thought, good for our students, which is great, and fun for us to meet these folks.
You can name drop, Ashley.
Well, we did have Clarence Thomas, and we had Tom Cotton, Andrew Roberts, great historian. We had Bob Woodward. So we've and many more. There's a bunch I'm leaving out. So that's a fun time, and I'll tease this one out. I can't name. We've heard from someone at least on a par of Clarence Thomas, who has tentatively talking about coming to visit us. So
say it here. Say it on the podcast. Come on.
I
Drop
can't
it
do
right
Yeah,
here.
right here. Yeah, right.
This
here.
is it.
But stay tuned.
Gosh.
Believe me, stay tuned.
All right.
Yeah.
That's a good teaser.
Yeah. So anyway, we've had a great time. Again, we've built so much, and we've had a great time. I hope this doesn't sound wrong, but we've had a great time serving our community, and I think every person who's come through those doors has really felt that responsibility, that joy of being part of this community, and again, cliche, being part of the solution a little bit. So we've had a great run.
Yeah, Ashley has taught history at MCC for 23 years now, you said.
That's right.
And so I can't go anywhere without someone seeing Mr. Cruseturner and interacting with that. I mean, to think the hundreds and thousands of students now that have kind of been through your classroom, and those students are interwoven in our community. So it's always neat to see them greet you. And it's usually a positive interaction.
They said they loved it that time that Dr. Sloan subbed for you. That's what they usually say.
I covered once.
Yeah.
So Marlene, are there kind of some stories that stood out to you in your history?
Well, I think the students. I remember having Senator Cruz on our campus in Fort Bend County, and they were going to show him the electrical lineman program, and we were trying to talk him into putting the gear on and going up the pole, and he declined. But there were two students there that I'll never forget, and they were the ones that were chosen to show him how to go up the pole. And both of them very articulate, attractive young men, and one of them was he had already had a business degree, but he stood out in front of his house after Hurricane Harvey, and because his whole family home was flooded, and so he's on the front porch watching the trucks go by, and he said all the people were going one direction in their cars escaping, and then all the emergency trucks were going the other direction. He said, I want to go that way. So he gave up his career and became an electrical lineman. I thought that was outstanding.
Awesome.
Well, the other young man, he had a full ride scholarship in swimming to Notre Dame and a full ride scholarship in academics to the University of Houston. And he turned them both down because I want to work in an office. So I thought, what I was talking about earlier about Sparkle, we all have that place where we feel like we belong. And for a student to find that and be excited about it is really what TSTC is all about. And then the other thing is, our funding formula is unique in the nation, and it is nationally known at this point. And I really give credit to Chancellor Reeser and to the Chancellor before him, Bill Segura, who devised that. And we all of the presidents of the campuses were in the Senate Finance room when that was first an idea. And Chancellor Segura was speaking, and Senator Steve Ogden, whom I used to be his legislative director, was the chairman of Senate Finance, and he was asking every college that came up, are you willing to go on an accountability type of formula? And they all went, no, that wouldn't work for us. And Chancellor Reeser we're always last in these hearings because we're the smallest school. And so he gets up there, Chancellor Segura, he gets up there and he says, well, we've thought about it and we like it and we're going to do it. And the presidents in the back of him were going, but it's been a ride. It's taken a number of years, but it works for us. And so it's a good model for the state and for the nation, really. Not everybody can do it, but we're a technical school. So our goal is jobs, and we're judged on whether or not we get jobs for students. And that's how we're paid. So that works for us. It wouldn't work for MCC or other schools. But.
And in terms of a challenge, and the state has reduced their level of support markedly over the last 50 years, which is really a success story, a happy story that the community has pitched in so much. So, when you look at those original proportions, a lot of that money was going to come from the state. And now a little comes from the state, and we're happy to get it. But mostly it's the people in the community subsidizing education for our citizens because they believe in it. And, of course, obviously, everybody's over there paying their share as well.
Right, and it pays dividends. It's what drives our economy. So it's a smart investment.
Well, I think it's been great to have y'all here on episode 2. Do you have other questions?
No more questions. I'd just say, as representatives of your institutions, thank you. Very. I think of ways that TSTC. I couldn't have had my business career without the talent that came, the pipeline of talent that came out of that school, and then MCC as well. My family has been touched. My children have done dual credit, and some of them have gone through MCC. It is such a jewel to this community that allows a lot more people into higher ed than would have otherwise.
Absolutely.
I was telling Rick that before, so we keep taking that Washington trip, but our Washington trip has gotten much better because of our MCC alumni. Ross Tullis is now our man in Washington, out there doing great, and so gratifying. And we've got several students like that. And Ross led us around the Capitol on a Saturday for about 2 hours.
But we almost didn't make it there because Professor Sloan was such a beatdown to when he went over to Baylor. But no,
so gratifying to see our students doing amazing things.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you all.
Thanks for listening to the Waco History Podcast. Like what you heard? Subscribe, rate, and review our show on iTunes so we can reach more listeners. You can find show notes and info on every episode at wacohistorypodcast.com, and more info on Waco's past at wacohistory.org. Our theme music, used with permission, is Cross the Brazos at Waco, performed by the late Billy Walker. For more info on Billy's music, go to billywalker.com. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next time. This has been a Rogue Media Network production.